It all started like one of those ordinary days at a local retail store, the kind of place where everyone's just trying to get through their shift without any drama. The staff knew their regular customers, and most people came in, bought what they needed, and left without a fuss. But on that particular afternoon, everything changed when she walked in, a woman who would later be known among the employees as Retail Karen. From the moment she stepped through those glass doors, you could almost feel the tension shift. She strutted in with her oversized sunglasses, clutching a designer purse that probably cost more than an employee's monthly rent. The way she looked around the store made it clear she wasn't there to shop. She was there to find something wrong. And when people like her go hunting for a problem, they always find one. It began with something small, a coupon. The cashier, a teenager named Lisa who had only been working there for 2 months, politely told her that the coupon had expired. Most customers would shrug and move on. But this wasn't most customers. Retail Karen leaned in, squinted at the coupon, and then said in that condescending tone every retail worker knows too well, "You're going to take it anyway." That's how good businesses operate. Lisa stayed calm, explaining that store policy simply didn't allow expired coupons. That's when Karen's voice rose an octave. "Well, I spend thousands of dollars here every year. You're really going to risk losing a loyal customer over a few cents?" People in the line behind her exchanged glances. Some rolled their eyes. The manager, sensing trouble, stepped in. His name was Marco, a seasoned retail veteran who had seen his fair share of customer meltdowns. He politely offered to give her a small discount just to calm the situation, but that wasn't enough. Karen wasn't after a discount anymore. She wanted dominance. She started pointing fingers, accusing Lisa of being disrespectful and incompetent. She even claimed the cashier had raised her voice, which everyone nearby knew wasn't true. When that didn't work, Karen demanded the corporate number, the regional manager's name, and even threatened to call her lawyer. Now, for most people, that kind of threat is just empty talk. But Karen, she actually followed through. 2 days later, the store received a letter, a real legal notice. Karen was claiming emotional distress, defamation, and even discrimination. Her demands? A public apology, free merchandise, and $10,000 in damages. The staff couldn't believe it. Even the legal department at corporate laughed when they read it, but they still had to take it seriously. The store hired a local attorney to respond, and that's when the situation snowballed. Karen, apparently encouraged by some bad legal advice she found online, decided she would represent herself in court. That was her first mistake. When the case finally reached small claims court, she walked in wearing a blazer and holding a stack of papers, convinced she was about to expose a massive corporate conspiracy. What she didn't realize was that the judge presiding over her case was none other than Judge Judy, known for her razor-sharp tongue and zero tolerance for nonsense. From the second Karen started talking, the courtroom audience knew this wasn't going to end well. She began her statement by declaring herself a victim of corporate abuse, claiming that the store intentionally humiliated her in public. She even accused the teenage cashier of psychological harassment. Judge Judy leaned back, gave her that famous unimpressed look, and asked, "Do you have any actual evidence of that, ma'am?" Karen shuffled through her papers, pulling out a handwritten note and a few blurry photos from her phone. "These are my witnesses," she said, waving toward the back of the room. But when the judge looked, the seats were empty. "Your witnesses didn't show up?" Judy asked, eyebrows raised. "They're busy," Karen replied. "But they told me they saw everything." That was all it took for Judge Judy to start slicing through her claims one by one. She asked direct questions, cutting through every excuse, every exaggeration, every dramatic statement. "So let me get this straight," Judy said at one point, tapping her pen on the desk. "You used an expired coupon, the store followed policy, and now you're suing them for emotional distress?" Karen nodded confidently, thinking she had the judge on her side. "Exactly. I was treated horribly. I have never been so disrespected in my life." Judy's eyes narrowed. "You weren't disrespected. You were told no. That's not the same thing." The courtroom chuckled, and Karen's face went red. She tried to regain control, accusing the store of targeting her because of her social status. She claimed she was singled out for being well-dressed and successful. Judge Judy didn't even blink. "You're not being targeted," Judy said flatly. "You're being told the rules apply to you just like everyone else." As the minutes passed, Karen's case completely unraveled. Every time she opened her mouth, she dug the hole deeper. When the judge asked her to provide receipts or any record of her supposed thousands of dollars in purchases, Karen admitted she didn't have them. She claimed she lost the receipts but knew she had spent a lot. At that point, even the court clerk was trying not to laugh. Judy finally turned to the store's attorney, who simply handed over a copy of the receipt from that day, showing the total purchase was $17.42. That was it. No harassment, no humiliation, no grand injustice, just a simple misunderstanding blown way out of proportion. Karen's face drained of color. She started stammering about how it wasn't about the money, which made Judy's eyebrow rise even higher. "Then why?" the judge asked slowly. "Are you asking for $10,000? Karen froze. The silence was painful. You could almost hear the audience holding back laughter. And that's when Judge Judy delivered the line that would later go viral online. She leaned forward, tapped her gavel once, and said, "Ma'am, you're not a victim of discrimination. You're a victim of your own entitlement." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Judy ordered her to pay court costs and dismissed the case entirely. But she didn't stop there. Because Karen had filed multiple complaints, including one against the corporate office and the individual employees, Judy advised the store's lawyer to countersue for defamation and legal fees. That was the moment Karen realized her stunt had backfired completely. She wasn't just leaving empty-handed, she was about to owe money. The judgment hit her harder than she expected. Between the fines, legal costs, and the penalties for filing frivolous claims, she was left drowning in debt. The same woman who had strutted into that retail store demanding special treatment now found herself paying for every bit of arrogance she'd thrown around. And when the story hit social media, it spread like wildfire. Clips from the court recording circulated everywhere, with titles like "Judge Judy Schools Entitled Karen" and "When You Sue the Wrong Person." People started recognizing her in public. The internet dubbed her Retail Karen, and the nickname stuck. At first, she tried to defend herself online, claiming the judge was biased and that the store had edited the footage. But no one believed her. The more she tried to justify her behavior, the worse it looked. Memes popped up overnight, showing screenshots of her stunned expression in court. Her reputation tanked. She lost her job not long after, because her employer didn't want the negative attention. Some people even claimed she tried to sue again, this time against the production company that aired the episode. That attempt failed too. By the end of it all, she had burned every bridge she had. The same entitlement that made her feel powerful turned out to be her downfall. In a strange way, the whole ordeal became a modern cautionary tale. People shared it as an example of what happens when arrogance meets accountability, and when someone tries to weaponize victimhood for personal gain. For the employees at that retail store, it became a running joke. Whenever a difficult customer came in, someone would whisper, "Careful, we've got another Karen situation." But deep down, they all knew it wasn't just funny. It was a reminder that sometimes, people forget that rules exist for a reason, and that no one, no matter how loud or entitled, is above them. And for Judge Judy, it was just another day of exposing nonsense for what it really was, with a touch of humor, a dose of common sense, and a sharp tongue that could slice through the thickest layer of entitlement. After the courtroom chaos, Karen's life began to unravel faster than anyone expected. What started as a simple tantrum over an expired coupon had spiraled into public humiliation, financial loss, and internet infamy. She thought the situation would blow over in a few days, maybe a week, but the internet never forgets, and this story had struck a nerve. Clips from the trial spread across every platform imaginable. TikTok users turned her courtroom meltdown into short comedy skits. YouTubers made reaction videos dissecting every moment of her argument with Judge Judy. Even late-night talk shows made passing jokes about the retail Karen who sued herself into bankruptcy. The whole thing became a meme, one that she couldn't escape. For a while, she tried to play the victim again. She made a Facebook post claiming she was unfairly targeted by media bias and that the judge manipulated the outcome to make good television. But the comments section didn't go the way she hoped. Hundreds of people flooded her post with clips, quotes, and even screenshots of her contradicting herself during the hearing. Within hours, she deleted the post. Her neighbors started whispering. At the grocery store, people would glance at her, trying to hide their smirks. Kids would point and say, "That's her, the lady from Judge Judy." Every time she heard laughter behind her, she couldn't help but wonder if they were laughing at her. Then came the financial hit. The judge's order required her to pay legal fees and restitution to the store, and the total came out to more than she had in her savings. When the paperwork arrived in the mail, she sat on her couch staring at it for hours. For the first time, she realized how deeply she had trapped herself in a mess of her own making. But instead of taking accountability, she looked for someone new to blame. She claimed her lawyer friend had given her bad advice, never mind that she had chosen to represent herself in court. She even considered filing another lawsuit, this time against the television network that aired the episode, arguing that they exploited her image. That case never even made it to court. The filing was dismissed immediately. Meanwhile, the retail employees she had tried to destroy were moving on. Lisa, the young cashier who had endured Karen's insults, was promoted to supervisor after how well she handled the confrontation. The store manager, Marco, received praise from corporate for keeping his team calm through the chaos. For them, the whole experience became a story they told new hires, a reminder that sometimes, patience really does pay off. But for Karen, the consequences were just beginning. Her landlord, tired of constant complaints about noisy neighbors and unfair parking rules, decided not to renew her lease. When she tried to fight that too, claiming housing discrimination, she quickly learned that her reputation as a serial complainer preceded her. No lawyer wanted to take her case. Eventually, she had to move out of her upscale apartment and settle for a smaller, less glamorous place on the edge of town. The contrast between who she thought she was and what she had become was stark. She had always seen herself as powerful, sophisticated, someone who could get whatever she wanted with a few sharp words. But now, those same words had destroyed her. Every time she tried to defend herself, people saw through the act. Her family stopped engaging with her drama, too. Her sister, tired of the constant negativity, told her to let it go and move on. But Karen couldn't. She was obsessed with proving she was right, even when the evidence was stacked against her. The more she tried to justify herself, the lonelier she became. One evening, months after the case ended, she sat alone scrolling through social media. A clip of her courtroom meltdown had been posted again, this time edited with dramatic music and captions mocking her excuses. It had over 2 million views. She clicked on the comments, hoping maybe someone would take her side. Not one person did. Some comments said things like she got what she deserved or this is what happens when entitlement meets reality. Others just laughed. It was brutal, but in a way, it was also the truth. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't before, not anger, not defensiveness, but shame. She thought about that day in the store, how it all began with a simple no, how easy it would have been to just accept the policy, to treat the employees with respect, to walk away. Instead, she had turned a small inconvenience into a personal crusade and lost everything because of it. The next morning, she went to the same retail store for the first time since everything happened. Most of the staff had changed, but a few familiar faces recognized her instantly. The air felt heavy as she approached the counter, holding a small basket of groceries. When it was her turn to pay, she smiled awkwardly at the cashier. "No coupons today," she said softly, almost like an apology wrapped in humor. The cashier, who hadn't been there for the original incident, smiled politely and rang her up. But one of the older employees nearby whispered to a coworker, "That's her." Karen pretended not to hear. She paid, took her bag, and walked out. But for once, she didn't storm off in anger or try to prove a point. She just left quietly. It was a strange, humbling feeling, one she wasn't used to. Over the next few months, she tried to rebuild. She got a part-time job to pay off her debts. It wasn't glamorous, nothing like the image she had always projected, but it was steady work. She learned to keep her temper in check, to say thank you and please, and to listen instead of demand. Slowly, the attention faded. The internet found new people to mock, new viral stories to chase. Her name stopped trending. The world moved on, but she didn't forget. Every now and then, she'd see reruns of her episode playing on late-night TV. She couldn't bear to watch the whole thing. But sometimes, she'd catch a glimpse, that moment when Judge Judy looked her dead in the eye and said, "You're not a victim of discrimination. You're a victim of your own entitlement." Those words echoed in her head long after the camera stopped rolling. And strangely enough, they started to make sense. For years, she had believed that the world owed her something: respect, attention, apology. But the truth was simpler: she owed the world humility. She had confused pride with strength, control with power. In reality, the strongest thing she could have done was admit when she was wrong. That realization didn't make her life perfect overnight, but it was the first real step toward change. Meanwhile, the story continued to circulate online as a cautionary tale. It became one of those never mess with Judge Judy moments, replayed in compilations of courtroom fails and instant karma videos. The moral was always the same: don't weaponize entitlement, and never underestimate the consequences of your own attitude. Years later, a reporter from a small local paper tracked Karen down for a follow-up piece. She almost refused the interview, but then decided maybe it was time to tell her side, not to justify herself, but to acknowledge the lesson she'd learned. "I thought I was standing up for myself," she admitted during the interview. "But what I was really doing was making everyone else miserable because I couldn't handle being told no. I wanted to be right so badly that I forgot to be decent." It wasn't an apology that erased what happened, but it was a start. The article ended with a quiet, reflective quote from her: "Sometimes, losing everything is what it takes to see yourself clearly." That line resonated with people in a way she never expected. For once, the comments were kind. Some said it was good she had changed. Others said it was refreshing to see accountability for a change. It didn't undo the past, but it gave her something she hadn't had in years: peace. For the world, the saga of retail Karen versus Judge Judy was entertainment. For her, it was a wake-up call. It showed that arrogance has limits, that truth always cuts through pretense, and that respect, once lost, takes a lifetime to rebuild. And for every retail worker who had ever been yelled at, insulted, or belittled by someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them, it was satisfying to watch justice served with clarity, wit, and a touch of poetic irony. Judge Judy didn't just rule against her that day, she exposed a truth that echoed far beyond the courtroom. That entitlement, when unchecked, destroys itself. That respect cannot be demanded through arrogance. And that sometimes, the loudest lesson comes not from winning, but from losing in front of the entire world. Because at the end of it all, when the cameras shut off and the laughter fades, all that's left is the truth. And for Karen, that truth was simple: she wasn't a victim of anyone else, she was the architect of her own downfall. Time passed slowly after the storm faded. Karen had gone from being a local spectacle to just another face in the crowd. The world had moved on, but the memory of what happened lingered in her mind like a scar that never quite healed. She kept a low profile. No more angry social media posts, no arguments with customer service, no threats to call corporate. She avoided confrontation entirely. If something went wrong, a wrong order, a delayed delivery, a billing issue, she took a deep breath and handled it calmly. It felt unnatural at first, almost like pretending to be someone else. But over time, she realized that peace was easier than chaos. Her new job was at a small local thrift store. It wasn't glamorous or high-paying, but it was humble work. The irony wasn't lost on her. After all the fuss she'd made about a coupon at a big retail chain, she now found herself on the other side of the counter. The first few weeks were tough. Some customers recognized her. A few even made jokes about hoping she doesn't sue them next. She laughed awkwardly and brushed it off. But deep down, she understood she had earned that reputation. She had spent so much energy trying to be right that she had forgotten how to be kind. Working retail taught her things she had never cared to notice before: the exhaustion behind every forced smile, the quiet patience it took to deal with rude customers, the weight of a long shift spent on your feet. Every time someone raised their voice or made unreasonable demands, she saw herself in them. And every time, she reminded herself to stay calm, to respond with grace. Slowly, she started to change. She learned to listen without interrupting. She learned to apologize when she made a mistake. She even learned to laugh at herself, something she never could have done before. Her coworkers noticed it first. They said she was dependable, easy to work with, patient. Words she'd never heard used to describe her before. Months turned into a year. Her life was quieter now, but in that quiet, she found something she had been missing for a long time: balance. There were no more lawsuits, no more angry phone calls, no public arguments. Just simple days and small victories. One afternoon, an older woman came into the thrift store. She was upset about a price tag mix-up and demanded to speak with the manager. The younger employees froze. They weren't used to confrontation. But Karen stepped forward gently and said, "It's okay. I'll handle it." She listened to the woman's complaint, nodded, and checked the item herself. There had been a small error, so she apologized and corrected it immediately. The woman calmed down, smiled, and thanked her for being understanding. After she left, one of the newer workers said, "Wow, you handled that like a pro." I thought she was going to yell. Karen smiled softly. "I used to be like that," she said quietly. "Now I know better." That small exchange stuck with her the rest of the day. It was proof that people can change, that even someone who had become the internet's punchline could find a way to rebuild. Around that time, an independent producer reached out to her about participating in a short documentary about viral courtroom moments and their real-life aftermath. At first, she hesitated. She didn't want to reopen old wounds or face public judgment again. But then she realized this could be her chance to tell the truth, not to defend herself, but to show that people can grow. She agreed, but only on one condition: that the story focus on what she had learned, not just what she had done wrong. When the documentary aired months later, it wasn't sensationalized or mocking. It was quiet, reflective. Karen spoke openly about her mistakes, about the humiliation she brought on herself, and about how it forced her to look in the mirror. She admitted that Judge Judy's words had haunted her for years, but now, she saw them as a turning point rather than a punishment. "I thought she was cruel at first," she said during the interview. But she wasn't. She was honest. And sometimes honesty hurts more than anything else. But it's what I needed. The documentary gained traction, not because of her scandal, but because of her honesty. People commented that it was refreshing to see someone admit fault without excuses. Some even said they related to her, that they too had let pride ruin relationships or jobs. For the first time in years, the comments about her were kind. Some people even apologized for mocking her back then. Others thanked her for showing that redemption is possible, even after public embarrassment. She didn't respond to most of the comments, but she read them all. And every kind word felt like a piece of her old self being quietly replaced with something better. One day, a letter arrived at the thrift store addressed to her. It was from Lisa, the cashier from the original retail store, now working in management at another company. The letter was short but heartfelt. Lisa wrote that she had seen the documentary and wanted to thank Karen for acknowledging what happened. She said she forgave her years ago, but seeing Karen own up to it brought her closure. Karen sat in the back room of the thrift store for a long time after reading it. That letter meant more to her than any apology she had ever received. It was proof that forgiveness really does exist, even for people who once made unforgivable mistakes. Later that week, Karen took a walk through the same shopping center where everything had started years ago. The big retail store was still there, newly renovated, brighter and more modern. She stood outside for a moment, watching people come and go, and realized how different she felt. The anger, the pride, the need to always be right, it was gone. All that remained was understanding. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. That chapter was over. As the sun set, she thought about everything that had happened, the courtroom humiliation, the internet mockery, the financial ruin, the long climb back toward self-respect. It had taken years, but she had finally learned the lesson Judge Judy had tried to teach her in that moment of truth. Life doesn't owe anyone special treatment. Respect is not demanded, it's earned. And sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight against our own ego. She never became famous again. She didn't want to. Her life was simple: work, home, quiet evenings, an occasional volunteer shift at a local food drive. But in that simplicity, she found something that money and attention could never buy: peace. Every so often, someone would recognize her from that old episode. Instead of feeling embarrassed, she'd smile and say, "Yeah, that was me. I deserved what I got." It disarmed people every time. There was no anger, no shame, just acceptance. And maybe that was the real justice. Not the kind handed down by a courtroom or written in a judgment order, but the kind that happens quietly, inside a person's heart when they finally see themselves clearly. For Judge Judy, it was probably just another case, another lesson in common sense. But for Karen, it was the moment that changed her entire life. She didn't end up rich, or famous, or powerful. But she ended up wiser. She learned to listen more than she spoke, to help more than she demanded, and to apologize without excuses. Years later, when she was interviewed again for a podcast about viral fame, she was asked if she regretted going on the show. She smiled and said, "No. I regret how I acted, but not that it happened. If it hadn't, I'd still be that person who thought the world revolved around me." Sometimes you have to lose everything to find perspective. The host asked her what she'd say to her younger self if she could. She thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd tell her to stop fighting everyone. Not everything is an attack. Sometimes people are just doing their job. And being told no doesn't make you a victim, it just means you're not special. And that's okay." The clip of that moment went viral again, but this time, not as a meme, as a message. People shared it for its humility, for the rawness of someone who had been publicly humiliated and still managed to grow from it. It became a different kind of story, not about a retail Karen who tried to sue everyone, but about a woman who learned from her own mistakes and turned embarrassment into empathy. In the end, that was the real legacy of her story. Not the courtroom chaos or the viral jokes, but the quiet transformation that came after. Because while the world loves to laugh at failure, it rarely celebrates growth. And in her case, growth was the most powerful redemption of all. She once stood in front of Judge Judy demanding justice. Years later, she found it, not in a verdict, but in herself.